All right, good evening, everyone. I'm going to call the meeting to order at 6 o'clock. The Greater Rutland County Supervisory Union October 1st board meeting. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. First order of business is to approve the agenda. I have one change, a request to move finance up on the agenda.
After staff student highlights.
What's that?
I think it's after staff student highlights, correct?
That's what I was thinking.
Okay, so.
I'll make the motion for that.
All right. Motion by Mike. Discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. General public comment. I don't see any public here tonight. And staff and student highlights.
That's me.
Welcome.
Chris, do you want to put up the slideshow? I did not bring audio this time, so we didn't have to worry about that, but just some pictures. And you can just kind of go through the slides as I'm talking. There's not really, you can just go through the slides talking. So
Jeff, can you mute? Someone's.
there we go.
All right, thanks.
So if any of you are Rutland Herald readers, we were recently featured in the Rutland Herald for our service learning class. This is a class that is primarily done out in the woods. This was sort of the brainchild of one of my amazing teachers, Linda McEwen, who wanted to look at how to take like reluctant readers and writers and really try to engage them in a different way. And so she believed her vision was like through giving back to a community and being in nature, sort of these things could all happen. So this class goes out in nature. We have some partnerships with Pine Hill, and we go over and we do some trail work there, and it's focused on literacy. And so she tries to pair outdoor work with like transcendentalism, which if you went to high school at any probably time, you have read some of the works, and they can be quite long and lengthy, and kids get really lost in them. And so her vision was to sort of create this shared experience where they can recall things together and then be outside doing actual work like journaling and reading about nature. And so this is a semester-long class. The kids have really taken to it. It was sort of, when we first rolled it out 3 years ago, students were like, I don't really know about this being in nature thing, but now it is one of our well-attended classes. People really enjoy going to it. She thinks, like, all of the kids actually think they're transcendentalists at this point. We've partnered with Habitat for Humanity and done some community service that way, and we really continue to try to look at like how can our students recognize what they do have and continue to give back. We have also partnered with the Food Shelf, and we have this year actually, we also partner with Vermont Outdoor Program, which puts kids in situations of like lifetime sports. How can you be active in the outdoors after you graduate? You don't normally have 20 people in a PE class when you're grown up, so how can you use the area resources around us? And so these are some of the pictures of some of the things that they're doing. A lot of kids at first say, what do you mean you want me to go out in a canoe and be out in nature? And then afterwards they're like, wow, I did it. This is one of the kids are like, please don't let me tip over. And so it really tries to get kids to sort of extend on their learning and put them in situations where the experience is what matters and that they can grow some confidence in a different way. This year, the class is actually partnering with a local author. I think it's on the last slide. And our town library. And we are bringing in Kate Messner, and we're bringing her in and she's gonna talk to us. We're doing a storyboard walk through town. So this class is actually going in town, clearing the trails, and then we're putting parts of one of the stories that she writes out there. So when people are hiking through nature, they can kind of read the story. She writes picture books as well. And then we have a thing called Drop Everything and Read, and we're going to be reading that 5 through 8 this year, and then the author will come and do some like talks to our students in May or June. She will be doing that. And so it's this class has sort of grown. We've kind of started branching out in different ways, and really has been an asset to us, and I can't thank Linda McEwen enough for all the work that she's done for this.
Nicely done.
Oh, thanks.
Very nicely. Yeah.
Thank you. All right, we're going to move on to finance. Louis?
Good evening, everyone. Chris, do you want to do the communication plan before or after budget?
No, just go ahead,
Okay, all right. So hopefully everyone reviewed the budget that was in the packet. I'm going to go through it page by page. Probably have to go back and forth a little bit because pieces of the conversation will point back to other pieces in the packet. So the first page is just a summary of changes, which identifies all the major impacts that happen in this budget, and it divides it up into three different sections. We have three sections of our budget. We have the general fund, which would be the superintendent's office, the business office, curriculum, technology, and our grant here. Then we have special education, which is all of your school-based special educators, paraeducators, any outside placement students that we're sending kids via choice, because it's a choice town, or we're sending them through an outside placement because of their disabilities. All of the transportation, everything is included in the special education budget for all of the schools, as well as the administration for special education. And then the final piece is the bill backs. And this piece is those employees who have SU contracts that are working directly in your schools, and they have SU contracts because a portion of their salary is funded through some sort of SU grant, whether it be the CFP grant or the IDB grant or some other federal grant that we're receiving. So what we give them SU contracts, we pay for that piece that is grant funded through the grant, and then we bill back the remaining piece to the local district that employee is working in. So looking at the general fund first, let's skip page 2 and looks like 2 and 3, and we'll come back to those in a few minutes. On page 4, it looks like the general fund budget starts. It's 2 pages. It includes all the details of the general fund, and I'll go over the highlights. So currently what you're looking in front of you is the general fund assessment is down by $60. So it's a 0% change. And this was accomplished through the following items. So I want the big things I want to point out was we cut 2 staff members last year, in the middle of last year, which had a savings last year, and then those savings flow through to this budget because they were already budgeted last year. That was a total of $106,000.
What was it?
There was 2 staffing positions that were cut last year. 1 business office and 1 technology position.
It was how much though?
$106,000.
Thank you.
Yep, and it's also on the summary of changes.
If I write it, I remember.
There's no staffing increases included in this budget for the general fund. It includes a 15% increase in health insurance. That is just an estimate at this time. We have not received any guidance from the state or from BISBIT yet as to what increase we will see for this round of budgets. I know in the letter that came out from the state, they talked about a 20% increase that private providers are showing, but we're our own pool, so we are impacted differently. It could be higher, it could be lower. We really don't have any guidance yet, so we're using this just as a placeholder. That 15% increase amounts to $35,000 for the general fund. VSBA dues would move to the local level. That is a local level expense. Software under curriculum was moved to technology section, so that's not really an impact in cost, it's just a movement within the general fund budget. It includes an estimated increase of rent of 3%. And so the two other things, so the first thing I want to talk about is the revenues. So if you go look at the second line on the revenue called miscellaneous revenue, we had $180,000 budgeted last year. That was mostly made up of indirect revenues that we are receiving from having the ESSER grants. So before COVID started and we started receiving these massive federal grants, we were still receiving indirect money. And indirect money is money that you can pull from a federal grant to use towards non-grant functions. So if you have a grant that's used for teaching, there's also expenses to maintain that grant. So business office has expenses for payroll, for paying bills. There's extra maybe supervision that's being done in central office. So it allows you to pull money off of that grant to pay for those things because you can't put those as investments in the grant. It's called this, and they call it indirect. So we were able to pull off 10% of the ESSER grants for indirects. So the ESSER grant was ESSER 3 was $3.6 million. So we can pull a total of $360,000 minus some other exclusions. So I think we're going to end up going to be pulling around $340,000 total. Some of that revenue we took last year, and some of it we're going to pull this year. Because the grant ends this year, we will not be able to pull any indirects from ESSER 3 next year. Before ESSER started, our miscellaneous revenue budget line was $60,000. We increased it when first we received CRF funds. That was the first grant from after COVID. Then there was ESSER 1, there was ESSER 2, ESSER 3. So we were able to maintain this revenue for the last 5 years. My recommendation, so I lowered the budget by $60,000. That number doesn't show as $60,000, that's because there's something else going on there. There's another item. But I lowered the indirect revenue that we're going to receive from those grants by $60,000. And my recommendation would be this year, we had $120,000 budgeted that we would pull from ESSER, but we're able to pull approximately $200,000 from ESSER. I'd like to use the other extra $60,000, and it's actually $80,000, but I'd like to use 60 of that as a carryover to help fund next year's budget so that it's not as big of a drop for next year. Does that make sense, or do you want me to explain that a little bit more? So next year we won't have any ESSER indirects, so this number should go down to $60,000, a decrease of $120,000 in revenue. My proposal is to take $60,000 that's not budgeted that we're going to receive this year and just use it as carryover to help fund that line. Make sense?
Kind of. I thought all the ESSER money is, like, has to be used and is.
We're claiming the indirect this year. It's going to sit in our miscellaneous revenue line. So our miscellaneous revenue line, even though we have $180,000 budgeted this year, it's going to be over $240,000 for this year. So we're going to have surplus in that line of over $80,000.
So we're just pulling ESSER money, sticking it on a line, pretending like we're going to use it,
Right.
and carrying it for surplus for next year.
Correct.
Designated, it's been designated, so it qualifies.
And then the following year, we'll need to lower this line by another $60,000 for FY27 budget. Everybody following so far? Okay. All right. So that's the total issue budget. Now, going back to page 2, this is the assessment allocation. As you can see, there's 3 years worth of data here. There's two columns. The left-hand side is the general fund assessment. That assessment is based on ADM. We use a 1-year lag because the data for this year isn't currently out, so we use last year's data. That's been the constant since we've merged. So as you can see, our ADM for last year was 1,903 students. And so we take the ADM for each district, and that district pays the percentage of the whole as their allocation. So Ira would be at 2.15, Corey Valley is at 54.61, Rutland Town is at 29%, and Well Springs is at 14.23%. Now, because everyone's ADM changes and that percentage changes, just because the budget is down doesn't mean every district is impacted equally. So if your district had an increase in enrollment, that means that your percentage of the allocation increased. So if you look at the allocations from the prior year, which would be just the box right below it, you can see how your allocation was impacted from the year before. So Ira's allocation went down from 2.28% to 2.15. Corey Valley is seeing a slight increase from 54.25 to 54.61. And Rutland Town seeing a slight decrease, a slight increase as well from 28.86 to 29. And then Well Springs is seeing a decrease from 14.61 to 14.23. The reason I point that out is because even though the budget is down, some people's assessment is going down and some people's assessment is going up. And you can see those values. If you go to either page 3, you can see the assessment for last year, the assessment for this year, and what your variance is. And you could also see that data on the last page of the general fund budget, which would be, I think it's what, page 5. At the very bottom, it's in the box there.
What's ADM?
ADM is average daily membership. It's the count that is done at the beginning of every year on October. It's called the October 1 count. It's from day 11 through day 30 of the school year. It's a total count of students enrolled. So for every student that's enrolled, you get 1 ADM if they're enrolled for the full 20-day window. If a student moves in on day 21, even though you still have to pay for that student's expenses for the whole year, you only get 0.5 credit for that student because they were only there for 10 days of that window.
Of the beginning of the year.
For that, yeah, ADM looks at a 20-day window, and ADM is what generates the pupil count that we use during like the tax rate calculation.
So that's a static number for the first 20 days.
Correct. So if you have a student that moves in on day 31, you get no credit for that student for that year. Same thing if that student is there for those first 20 days and then they move out, then you still get the credit even though you only have that expense for that student for the first 20 days. So it is looking at, it's a snapshot in time. There's no weighting in that involved in that count. It's every student every student that is enrolled is worth the same value as far as ADM goes. The pupil count that we look at later in this process, though that has weighting for different things like level of instruction and poverty and stuff like that. But ADM is just a straight count based on enrollment days.
Do you have a question?
I do, but I'll wait till we get to the special ed, because it's related to that too. Thanks.
Okay. So moving on, just to still on the general fund, just some of the other data that I've provided in the packet. Right after the budget was a list of the staffing. For each staff member, I listed what the local funding percentage was. So if a staff member is partially funded through grants, then their percentage would be below 100%. And then there's a report later on that we'll talk about that lists all the staff members that are funded through grants. And then I listed the employee's total compensation, which would be salary and benefits. The next page, still on the general fund, is the general fund assessment over the last 5 years since 2021. The total SU assessment has seen an increase of $64,000 over the last 5 years, which is an annual increase of less than 1%. It's just to illustrate that we do our best here to keep things as flat as possible because we know the impact that it has on your local budgets. And then the next page is just a list of softwares and which ones we're funding at the SU and which ones will be bill backs. If you were on the board last year and you recall, we talked about this a little bit, where there was many programs that were being paid directly by the schools, and we talked about consolidating those to the SU and just having those be part of the assessment. We are not looking to do that at this time, so we just kept the ones that we were paying at the SU level, which was Infinite Campus. That's the big one. That's our data management system, which manages all of our students and staff. We have our accounting software, which is NEMRIC, and then PaperCut, which is our printing software, and Mojo, which is our ticketing system for technology. All of the other programs are school-based programs for testing assessments and like a grade book and any of the programs that students are using directly. So we looked at it based on if we were a standalone business and we didn't have students, what programs would we still need? And we kept those ones at the SU level. And if they're programs that were specifically needed for students, then we left those as bill backs and have the schools pay them directly. This is not a change to any schools. It doesn't change the school's level expenses at all. These were expenses that were being paid directly. We were just providing further data for you.
What was securely?
Securely that is the one, that is a technology-based software.
That's the Dino one,
That's the
right?
Dino, yes.
Yeah.
Do you know what that is?
Yeah, it's a software program that allows for teachers to kind of ninja into students' devices to see what's on their screens. And we have capacity through our Google Suite to be able to go in and track history and whatever a student has done on a device. That's a software that is like real time. The other just takes a little bit of research.
Is that the one like if a child is looking into something that's inappropriate, it kind of brings it up to Greg and his crew and they can let everybody know what's going on?
Yeah, there's other filters through our safety software that will pull out like warning indicators for students. That one is really just like lets a teacher zoom into a student's screen in real time.
So are all of these bill back programs being used in every school?
Yes, any school that's appropriate grade level wise, but I think they're all every school
I believe so.
at this point.
So $7,500 for Securely is for every building?
Yes.
Just for clarity on a lot of these softwares, is my guess is that there's no value in the central office buying it because it's probably subscription based, like per student, right?
Yeah.
Versus one entity holding a license that then they could share with 1,000 kids. It doesn't matter. They're just going to charge you per kid. So if
We
it's all
already-
in town
yeah.
paying for it, we're not getting any consolidation.
We already have a district level license for
Okay, so there's
anything
no
that's
value.
possible to get a district level
That's what I
license
thought,
for.
yeah.
And
All
it's
these
just
programs are now
billed
basically,
back.
you have 30
Yeah.
kids, we're going to charge you X, 31
Yeah.
kids, it keeps going.
Yep.
And we're still doing the bulk buying at the SU. The SU is paying the bill.
Yeah.
But rather than putting it as part of the SU budget and assessing it based on the application, it's going to go into a sort of like a clearinghouse fund, and each school or district will be billed based on how many students they have, or whatever the metric is. So
Yeah.
if it's a student-based program, it will be based on how many students they have in their building. If it's a staff-based, then maybe it will be staff-based. Any questions on the general fund before we move on to special ed? Okay, hearing none. So moving on to special ed. So I wanted to start with, there are a few pieces in special ed that are still pending. So there's some revenue numbers that we have not received from the state yet. We have not received the updated census, which would be that big revenue number on the first page of the special ed budget. That it's currently estimated at $3.7 million. That is just an estimated 3% increase over last year. Hoping to have that number by next month. Also, the EEE grant number is an estimate, and the grant revenue number is an estimate. All the expenses Of course, there are always estimates because we know special ed is volatile and can change pretty rapidly. But what it is based on current students that we know about. What we do is we move students, we move them up the grade, and we kind of plan accordingly, not knowing who's going to move in, who's going to move out. We can only plan for what we know. So currently, I'm just going to summarize a few things, and then we can go through some more details. But right now, the special ed budget assessment is up by $56,000, which is a 1.8% increase. Going back to page 2 and looking at the child count, again, we talked about this with the general fund. Special ed is also based on a metric based on last year's data. It's based on the special ed child count. This is a count that's done every December, and it's accumulation of, or a calculation of all the special ed kids per school and per district. So as you can see on that page, we had a total of 353 special ed students, which is an increase of 21 students from last year. So obviously as our student count increases, the need increases, our expenses would increase as well. Again, as you're looking at this data, look at how each of your districts is impacted, because just because the total went up and the budget went up, your percentage may have not have went up. So each district is impacted differently. Again, so like Ivor went from 0.9% of the allocation to 0.57. So even though the budget's up, they're not going to see as much of an increase. Looking at the summary of changes, just to highlight some of the major impacts that are in this. The majority of the increases are due to increases in contractual wages and benefits. I'm just going to skip around over here. Health insurance is a 15% increase, which is $192,000. There are changes in the wellness center model that are built into this budget. I'm not sure if Tammy's going to talk about it tonight. This is something new, so she may ask that we table that until the next month. Total staffing is up by 6 FTE, and there is a page in the packet towards the end which lists the staff changes by category. We can look at those now, or we can come back to that in a little bit. Child count, I mentioned child count increase. So I mean, that covers all the summary of change items.
So can I ask a question about the summary of change?
Sure.
So you say the staff cost for the Connections program at Pulteney is being offset by tuition savings. But don't we get reimbursed for tuition for special ed?
So for any student that's has extraordinary costs, which means that their cost is over $66,000, there is a separate reimbursement. Is that what you're referring to?
So
Yes.
my question is, were we receiving any reimbursement for any of these students when they were being tuitioned
Yes,
out?
so if you look on page 1 of the special ed budget, there's a line item called extraordinary reimbursement. That's the revenue that we're receiving above and beyond that block grant. So for any student that has expenses above $66,000, we have to report that at the end of the year, and we can get 95% of every dollar that's spent above that. Plus, there's another piece of that calculation that gives us additional funding for those students. So many of those students that were at Lehigh that closed and is now part of our Connections program fell into that category where they were over that $66,000. Maybe not all of them, but some of them. The way we've built the Connections program, or as far as revenue-wise and expense-wise, we're going to be tracking expenses for those individual students. So because it's a standalone program within our school, if a student has a one-to-one that they're assigned or extra services, we're tracking those costs by student. And for any other staff that are in that program, we're dividing those costs among those students. So some of those students that are in that Connections program that were high spenders at Lehigh will still be high spenders at the Connections program, and we'll still be able to claim that additional revenue.
Okay,
Does that
because
answer your question?
I just think the sentence is a little misleading when you say that the staff cost for this program is being offset by tuition savings. So,
So what I meant to say or explain there is that you're going to see an increase in this budget in staffing and staffing costs as per the 6 FTEs, and if you look at the individual salary lines. But if you look on page 1 towards the middle section there's other lines where we were paying tuition out to those schools. So under the professional services line, you're seeing a reduction of $214,000. Under in-state tuition, you're seeing a reduction of $537,000. A lot of that is savings for funds that we were paying to Lehigh that we're now not paying that to Lehigh. Instead, we're paying that to our own in-house staffing.
and those were funds that were not being reimbursed.
Well, some of those funds are being reimbursed still.
Okay.
So if you look at the
So
revenue
I just want to
line,
be clear, because I don't have a problem with the program. I just think it's a little messy, the way it's being laid out. It sounds like because we brought it in and we're not doing that, we have this big savings. And that's not 100% true.
I'm not saying that we have a savings. I'm
Okay.
saying that it's not a direct increase in staffing, that there
Okay.
is an offset to staffing
I like
in the
that
tuition,
phrasing
in
better.
the tuition line.
Yeah, I like that phrasing
Okay.
better, personally.
Yeah. I don't think we'll know whether there's savings or not until we have some data that we can really
Sure.
look back at.
But I'm just, if I'm someone from the public looking and I see you have an increase of 6 FTE, and you're telling me that this isn't really increase, that's not 100% true. I think that there's a better way to phrase that, is all I'm saying. I'm not trying to give you a hard time
Okay.
about it. I'm just saying, the way we're presenting it, I don't think is 100% accurate.
And there's an increase because you had to move the kids back in. So there has to be an increase in staff because there were outside staff
Correct.
Taking
We're paying
care
for
of
it either
this
way. Big
children.
savings in money.
So-
We're paying less,
Right.
paying your own people less than you'd pay someone else. I think of it that way.
Yes, that's
Take care of your own
not,
kids, you can pay someone else to
right,
take care of
right,
your kids.
because you're,
That's a good way to
yes,
phrase
when
it.
you
And sometimes
said-
it's not a savings, but
Right.
we're paying for it either way.
I mean, it's a shift from one line to another.
Right.
And like I said, we don't know if there's going to be savings yet. We'll have to see. I mean, it's a new program, and so we built it with staffing, not knowing exactly how much staffing we're going to need. And as they continue to evaluate the students and evaluate how the program is going, they may need to add, they may need to take away. I know just because it's new, we started with a company that we're contracting out some of the services that they're coming in and providing, or they were supposed to be providing BCBA and some BTs, but they're having staffing issues as well. So for next year, we're looking at not contracting out any of those services, hiring our own people, but we weren't able to find those people on short notice, as well as we are bound by our negotiations agreements, which resulted in us having some difficulties filling those positions as well. But for next year, we are planning to having this totally staffed by our own people. That's what's built into here.
right. And anytime you bring somebody back from an institution, you're paying all their overhead. You're not just paying, you're paying a whole lot more. That child goes out of district, so.
Right, but I think that's where the reimbursement piece comes
Right,
into play,
right.
so.
Tina?
Thank you, Eric. I was trying to figure out why the special education ADM went up so much higher compared to the full ADM for Corey Valley, just proportionally. Is that because of Lehigh closing, that those students came back into the district, or is there a different reason?
It wouldn't be because of Lehigh, because this is based on town of residence, not based on enrollment. So it's.
That's what I thought.
it's
I was just curious what the reason was.
Tammy, I don't know if you have any insight on that. I mean, this is old data, so this would have been prior to Tammy. This is based on last year's child count.
Let me look.
Well, I think to Tina's point, I mean, that was really one of my questions, is this a trend everywhere? Our ADM's up 2.7% over the 3-year, and our special ed numbers are up 12.7%. So is this trending everywhere that our population's at a 3%, but we're seeing special ed at double digits?
My personal insight on this is, yes.
Okay.
And I can tell you that it equates to, like over in New York, we saw population going down, but our SPED numbers increasing. And it had to do, we equated it to the pandemic learning loss. And so what we were targeting over there is exactly what we're doing here, is looking at why are we getting an increase in kids qualifying for special ed services. If we're equating it to the pandemic learning loss, then we need to be getting ahead of it. And MTSS, Tier 1, everything that we're doing here is exactly what I see going on in New York, is trying to prevent that increase in SPED numbers.
Yeah, hopefully our early ed stuff that we're doing
Right.
will translate down the line, would be great.
Right, 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, 2-year-olds, right,
Love it.
right.
Question was, for state reimbursement, where is that line item coming from the state? Where are they pulling that from?
It all comes out of the, there's
Federal
a
grant?
special ed appropriation
From the state, or is it federal back?
from the state. The line item that's listed as grant revenue, that is federal grant, that's the IDB grant.
Okay.
Everything else is a state appropriation.
And
So-
they're getting that out of the ed fund or the general fund?
That would come out of the ed fund, I believe, but there's
Okay.
a certain amount that's appropriated into that fund at the beginning of the Eddington statute each year, and all of those reimbursements come out of that.
Just from my own knowledge, it'd be nice to see where they're compiling that money from our taxes, because it looks like, through assessment, we're paying, locally, we're paying for about 37.5% of our special ed, and the rest is being reimbursed from the state, which is also us. So,
Yeah.
just to have some transparency with the taxpayers on where that's coming from, not putting it on you, but,
And so a couple of years ago, similar to Act 127 that we dealt with last year, a few years before that, there was Act 173, which, where they got rid of what we were on a reimbursable model, where there was only a small block grant, but then everybody had to submit all of their expenses at the end of the year, and you received a reimbursement. And so the way it worked with that model was, there was an state appropriation, let's say just $20 million. Everybody got their block grant, which was like, again, a small amount. And then at the end of the day, there was an estimate of a 55% reimbursement for every dollar you spent. But everybody would submit their expenses, and then the state would see how much was submitted, how much money they had in their appropriation, and then they would calculate what that percentage was going to be. So you were working on an estimate all year long, and you didn't know what that actual percentage was going to be. And it never really moved more than 0.5% or so, or 1% when you're looking at a large amount. Act 173 got rid of that reimbursement model and moved to a full block grant model, where we receive a flat dollar amount based on the number of students that we have. And with that,
actual students, or is it
ADM, yes, it's based on ADM, not special ed students.
not equalized?
Not equalized, no, just straight ADM.
Right.
And so with that, when that model was enacted, similar to Act 127, there was winners and losers. So if you were a high spending district where you spent more on special ed on a per student basis, then when this was enacted, you saw a decrease in revenue because the reimbursement model was working in your favor. And if you were a low spending district where you weren't spending a lot on special ed funds, either your students were maybe had lower needs, or you had better systems in place and had more efficiencies, then you saw an increase in revenue. We have been seeing an increase in revenue every year, so we were a low spending district. So I'm actually hoping that when we get that revenue estimate, we'll see more than a 3% increase, but I'm sort of hoping I was just being a little conservative in this number.
I think, so from a global perspective, the block grants kind of takes out the dollar chasing the kid that needs it, just more to here's how many kids you have, here's your piece of the pie.
Yeah, so if
You
a
don't
high,
have kids,
if
you're
I,
not using it.
if a high, if you have 3 special ed kids move into the district that year, you don't get any additional revenue.
The dollar's not falling
Or-
short, it's just,
yeah.
okay.
George, you had a question?
Just a question and a comment. I mean, if we didn't have this capability to house these kids in Poultney, where would they go? And would that increase costs?
Good question. There's really limited outside placements available. Tammy could probably talk more about this, but I mean, we struggled, and that was one of the reasons why we created the Wellness Center, was because we needed a place for these students. Tammy, do you want to talk about this at all? Or?
Right, so, there was that echo, did you hear that? You know, so when I look at, like, the Connections program, I think of all those kiddos that we have in there. And I think about the programming that we have in this area, one that has no openings. And so we would have to look at places that would be putting these kiddos an hour, hour and a half one way on buses, which would not be good for that population. So we would be looking at home tutoring, or we would be looking at programming that wouldn't give them a free and appropriate education. So they wouldn't be able to access their education. And then if we did, you know, like I look at VAC right now, and their programming is like over $100,000 to $150,000 for a kiddo to meet the needs of those that are in our program right now at Connections. The kiddos at the Wellness Center, the same thing. We were able to, well, I already told this story, that we have one kiddo that's 90% back at Poultney Elementary, and he's doing well. But yeah, it would cost us on average 80 to 120,000 per kiddo in an outside placement. Add the transportation. So we definitely save money by creating our own programs in-house.
Thank you.
Yeah.
How much more do you have on the special education?
So Tammy, did you want to speak to Wellness Center at all tonight, or do you?
So there has been some changes that have happened, and I am asking the board if you would allow me to be able to have the luxury of doing a really detailed presentation in November. I would appreciate allowing Katie to come with me, Katie Loomis, who is the LEA for Poultney. I've already met with Chris to kind of discuss a few things, and I would feel more comfortable being able to come with more information and more data at this time.
There's a conversation that we need to have tonight in executive session around personnel, around the wellness program as well. So we'll begin that discussion
Yeah.
tonight.
I would appreciate that. Yeah.
So, but this budget does include funding for those students, but in a different manner. So just, I mean, it's not like that has been left, those students have been left off. It's just,
Right.
But the expectation is at the November meeting, we're going to hear the proposal and approve the budget.
We will discuss.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear.
Excuse me?
That's one of the issues we'll have to discuss tonight.
Okay.
So the following the budget is some pages with lists similar to the general fund, just all listing all the staff, their percentage of local funding, which in this case is 100% for everybody. Some of them you'll see, actually it's not 100% for all of them. Some of them are funded through a different grant that's not included in here. But some of them you'll see where they're at 80% or 85%, but then later on you'll see them at, it's the same person at 15%. And that's just because some of them are split between pre-K and K through 12. But this is a list of all the staff and their total compensation. Following that, if you skip the bill back page just for a moment and go to the following page, is the page I was referring to earlier with the list of all the staffing. It's a comparison from this year to last year for special ed and showing that 6 increase. And then below that is current data on the Wellness Center program, which was requested at the last meeting. So it lists the staffing and all the different expenses that we have for that program, total enrollment, and what the cost is on a per student basis currently for that program. And then the last page, before we go back to the billbacks, is just a list of all our grant-funded positions with their total compensation, their FTE, what percentage it's funded out of, and which grant they're funded through. Some of the positions that are ESSER funded, well, all the ones that are ESSER funded, I listed whether there's local funding available, and for all of those positions, there is either local funding or another funding source already set up, so it's not an increase to the local budget. So the only one on here that says no, that also lists as ESSER, is because there's another funding source that's not local funding, which is, and it's Medicaid. Going to the bill back page, which we skipped a couple pages ago, it just is a list of all the staff members that are directly in buildings, which is mostly interventionists and then 2 behavior specialists, and what percentage is local funded, and the amount that's being billed back to the local budgets.
Tina?
Hey, thank you, Eric. So I have a few questions, and I'll start with my special ed ones. On the SLP, is it, I realize that we're contracting for one of the positions, but I'm curious, is that out of necessity, or is it actually better for students? And if it's not out of, if it is out of necessity, if it's not better for students, why are we not budgeting for an actual in-person position for next year?
So we're on year 2 of that model. It started beginning of last year when they weren't able to find an SLP replacement. When we did the budget last year for this current year, we continued to budget a staff position, not a contracted position, in the hopes that they would be able to find somebody. They were not able to find somebody for this year, and based on conversations with Bill at the time, towards the end of last year, it was my understanding, based on the conversation, that the model of the remote person was actually working out well for those schools that they were serving. Now I'll let Tammy follow up with that.
And
You're muted, Tammy.
I need a sticky note that says check your button. When I followed up with that this year, they said the same thing, that the remote person is working, she's got a great rapport with the kiddos that she's seeing, it's the same kiddos that she sees, and it works for those specific children that she continues to see. They're seeing growth, they're making progress.
That's awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
My next question, Louis, is I noticed that VSTERS, which I think is the pension fund, is that correct?
Yes.
That went down for support services, psychological services, and direct instruction, but it did not go down across the board. I was just curious why.
So that is a percentage of salary, and that gets shifted. So that's for only the employees that are federally funded. That's what we're paying for those on. And so just based on the changes to the grant, or changes that we made this year through the grant, it changes where those positions, what positions are being funded. So it's just a shift from how we did the grant last year to how we're doing the grant this year.
So it's due to changes in grant funding. Is that correct?
Grant investments, I would say.
Okay. Thank you. And then, I'm wondering if the 15% is being a little too conservative for the health insurance increase across the board, given that it went up 16.4% last year, and the Green Mountain Care Board has approved insurance premiums that are in the high teens at least, I believe, for both Blue Cross Blue Shield and MVP. And I'm wondering why we can't budget for at least what it went up last year, and if it's higher than it's supposed to be great, but I'm not convinced it will be lower than that.
So by next month, I should have some estimates from Bisbit. They do their filing in October. This was a number that was discussed by some other local business managers, and that's the number that they were using. Like I said earlier, we're part of a pool, so we shouldn't be seeing those same increases. And we've seen larger increases the last few years. So, I mean, we are hopeful that we still think it's going to be high, but we're hoping that it's low double digits and not on the higher end. Again,
So you're thinking
it's a shot in the
that we'll
dark.
have a more accurate number next month?
We will, yes.
Okay. And then my last question right now is, I was just curious if there are any SU-wide initiatives to overall decrease the budget. Just for an example, like digitizing more forms, decreasing paper usage, those type of things.
So as far as like, we just entered into a new contract with our copiers, and we did look closely at what each building had, and we did make some reduction in copiers. We also, through that process, provided reports to administrators on what their copy usage is on a per school basis, and compared to other schools that are in our SU, to see if they could really review that and see if maybe their usage is excessive, because there were schools that are definitely standing out versus others. But when you look at copy usage, it's the copy paper, it's the cost that we're being charged on a per copy basis, so it's multiple things that cause that type of expense. I mean, that's the most recent thing that we looked at and did to have potential cost savings. I did go out to bid recently for fuel oil. We knocked, I think a nickel off what our current rate is. So we should hopefully see a little savings in fuel oil for next year. I think those are the only things that are coming to mind.
Tina, there's one other thing we would add. Lewis and I have been meeting with the facilities directors. Since we don't have an SU-wide facility director, Lewis and I have become the de facto, assume that role. We have discussed with them the need for us to purchase supplies as an SU as opposed to independently. I know in the past, people have had, independent contracts, but we're looking at more bulk purchasing, which may help offset costs across the SU. That's part of, what the SU is designed to do is, look at economies of scale, and we have addressed that with the facility directors, and they are on board with that. So we will be looking at more SU-wide purchasing of cleaning supplies, materials that would benefit, result in a reduction in costs and some savings for our local districts as well.
Thank you so much. I love that, and that's really helpful information to get back to the voters at our local boards. So thank you.
Meredith. Oh. Static.
I missed this, that 30 plus, building maintenance of the wellness center?
I'm sorry.
Building maintenance at the
Building
wellness
maintenance
center.
proposal.
We didn't quite catch that.
The building maintenance at the wellness center.
Right,
The cost,
versus the rent. Like, what are we maintaining when we're renting it?
the 32,000
So that-
versus the 24.
That is for custodial, so we hired a custodian that was being split between Polney Elementary School and the wellness centers, so to go clean the building, empty trash, maintain the building.
Does he do some driving too?
He's not currently
Oh, he's not,
driving.
okay.
No. Staff members are driving.
Oh, so that's salary, is what you're
Yes,
saying?
they're employed by Corey Valley, and Corey Valley's billing back the SU.
But it's salary, it's
Yes.
not work we're doing on the
Yes.
building? Because that's the way, I think that's maybe what she thinks, because that's how it reads, that that's the maintenance we're doing on the building.
Any other questions, comments, feedback?
I had a question about, I didn't see it here, but about our surplus for special ed and so is that in here carried over or do we? need to-
No, so that's still sitting out there. So we had, I don't know, the numbers are in front of me, but it was approximately a little over 100,000, I think, for central office. And like 400 for special ed, something like that. It was a large number. So those numbers, as always, we have the choice we can either refund those this year and have that be part of this year's budget as an unexpected revenue, or we can build those into your local budgets as refunds, or we can build those into here as a revenue to help off the assessment. That's really a board decision.
And I believe that you came though with the recommendation when you provided the numbers before, right?
You mean last year or last month?
Last month.
So last month, I suggested potentially using those to offset the assessments, but at that time, I didn't know where everything was going to flush out. And I think things have flushed out a lot better than I had anticipated. So, I mean, I expected our budget to be higher, and maybe that needed to be able to keep our assessment flat. But with central office already pretty much with being down and special ed only being up 1.8% at this time, if we use those funds, it would definitely bring our assessment way down. The only issue that I see with using that money to put it into this budget as a revenue would be the following year, we're not going to have that revenue, and then our assessment's going to jump up. So that's definitely the same thing when you have your local surpluses. So that is the benefit for you to take it this year, because it just feeds it right into your surplus, or maybe you could even just use that this year. So like if you have building projects, if we gave that all back this year, and let's say a district was getting $100,000, you can maybe as the board level decide, okay, we want to use that $100,000 to use on these projects this current school year, which would have no impact on your budgets and no impact on the following year's budget, FY27. So.
I think I asked this last time, it's just a reimbursement, it's not tagged as special ed at that point?
No, it's just a regular ed.
So it'd be better to know now, so building out local budgets. So, Tina?
That's just what I was gonna ask. When do you recommend we make that decision as a board, Louis?
Well, you're going to see your first drafts at the November board meeting at your local boards. If you decide that tonight, then I can reflect that into your first drafts. If you don't decide that tonight, then I could either put it in there as a revenue, and then we may have to take it out, or I could leave it out and decide to put it in at a later time. So, I mean, if you make that decision tonight, I think we go into the first draft of your local budgets a step ahead and sort of knowing where things are.
Okay.
Except for the fact that SU does meet before all your local boards, so in theory, you could decide that at the next SU board meeting, and I can still make those changes to your local budgets before your local boards meet.
It's the pleasure of the board.
I think that due to time-wise, it might be better to put it off till next week. Or next month, I mean.
Okay. All right. Any other questions for Lewis on the budget? Any feedback, input?
It's a great story for us to be taking into our budget season, you know, how you guys have controlled the budget over the last several years of the massive inflation we've seen. Hopefully it shows the constituents of the SU that, you know, we're not purposely wasting money. There's a purpose to centralize things, and we can take that messaging with us. And hopefully, you know, explain to you that, you know, the special ed portion is mandated, so that's, you know, a lot of that's out of our control. We have to take care of these kids, and we're doing the best we can. So appreciate you guys.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Are you doing the communication plan under finance?
Yeah, and I can just briefly talk about this. So as part of the superintendent goals that we discussed last month, the board had requested one of the superintendent goals to be developed around supporting boards and communicating budgets and budget items. And so what I have placed in the folder for everyone to reference is a draft of a board communication plan that we would use. And obviously that, you know, there are timelines that we put out, and obviously things can be adjusted. A lot of this, when I drafted this, I met with Lewis to kind of talk about this, because I know that he would have to work with me on some of the communication, some of the materials. We really try to work around local boards, budgets and communication, since that's where a lot of the pushback we've seen in the past has been around that. So really just, you know, feedback. I know that this is something which we'd like to keep all the boards on the same sort of timeline, that we're not, you know, we don't want to do 5 different plans, that, you know, this is meant really to support the boards. I think that we've all found a need to try to get out information, but as I looked at this, you know, I think they said we, you know, there's a need to, you know, educate the public and our staff and our stakeholders on the cost drivers, what these cost drivers are, how they impact our budgets, you know, separately. I know Rutland towns, you know, the impacts on them are a little bit different than Corey Valley and Wells, and so therefore we would adjust the communication messaging to those different communities to reflect that. But we just wanted to find a way to make sure that our community members and our stakeholders have all the information necessary to make an informed decision when they're going to the polls. I met with Greg and Shannon a couple days ago. We're looking to revamp our websites to make the budget page more user-friendly. And it'll be, you know, there'll be a GRCSU site. There'll also be spots for, you know, each of our local boards as well. But we're looking to really upload a lot of information. I know that you know, this Lewis and I might be, you know, having like, you know, presentations that we'll do, similar to what we've done for PEG TV, just to explain, like short little videos to explain just one aspect of the budget. We also are trying to look at ways to, as we present first drafts of budget, second drafts, if there's a letter that can go out to the public or to our stakeholders that better explains the budget and what some of these drivers are. And I know that one of the big impacts is also around CBA, and just educating our community around CBAs and how that impacts. And you know, it's never ideal to be negotiating during a tough budgeting season, but that's just that's, you know, just where we're at and just the potential impacts and of that. So so it's a welcome feedback. You know, I think you know, we present this, or just, you know, it'll be in all the local board packets as well. So if there are any questions or suggestions, please feel free to reach out to one of the chairs or myself. We'll do it. So, but it was really meant to provide a more of a structured approach around communicating and support our boards, get the message out.
I thought it looked great. I mean, I'm sure after we go through it for a year, things will have to be tweaked depending upon different boards. But I mean, it's very thorough, and I think it's certainly a nice approach that we're all approaching it in the same manner, and that's just one more piece of how we're coming together, I think. So I appreciate it. And obviously a great deal of work, time went into it, so thank you.
Tina.
I second that. I really appreciate all the work that you put into that, Chris. I think it's great that we're trying to all get our local boards to communicate with our communities in a similar fashion across the SU. I think that that really helps with the entire cohesiveness of us. And I really urge board members, if you haven't had a chance to look at that budget communication plan, if you could please do so before your local meetings, so that you, with that lens in mind, so that if you do have any feedback, that we can get that to Chris before we start implementing the plan.
And I just want to reiterate, like you said, we understand that there are unique needs to each of our boards and each of our communities. Similar to what I put in my superintendent's report about the request for information. I think we just have to, our job is to support the boards any way we can. But like I said, we don't want to really go to having 5 different plans for this, because like I said, there's a lot of work here that needs to be done. I think it's valuable work and needs to be done, but we just want to make sure that it aligns with the board needs and the communities. The one discussion that we will have to have is that we're aware that it's easy for us to reach our parents, our stakeholders, but we have a lot of community members who don't have access to our email or newsletters, and I know that in the past we tried a variety of ways to get that message out, but I think we'll just have to be creative about that, because we know that sending mailings out, there's a cost to that. I know I'll reach out to Sophia Buckley Clint over at Rutland Herald, who's been very good about reporting that if we're presenting information to our local boards, that she can be at the meeting or send the meeting to her, that she might be able to assist us with just giving us a bit of write-up in the newspaper. But I think we have to just be creative about how we can get this out. But I think the biggest thing for our boards is we want to make sure that if a community member can't come back at the end and say, well, I wasn't informed, or you didn't give us the information, we have a plan that we will present this. Well, this will be on the website too, so we'll not be behind closed doors. This will be a public-facing document as well, so people can see what is out there.
And I think, particularly as we move into basketball season, maybe more so in Corey Valley because we cross over, but having whatever those newsletters are available at the schools, at the library, at the town office, we have the ability to have that cross-section when we're playing one another and to get a different kind of group of people. And the libraries also have activities going on that cross a different population also, that might not be students, that people that have students, or even just town office when you go to pay your taxes, water and sewer. So, those are obvious places, I think.
Where is it, that communication plan?
It's in the resource folder right now.
Under the GRCSU or under Corey Valley?
Right now it's under GRCSU. I've not dropped them into local yet, so
Okay.
we'll upload that.
Because Tina had mentioned it would be nice to read it. So, yeah, it'd be great if you could drop it in. Thank you.
No, I didn't want to put it in until after I presented this to the board, but we could do that tomorrow. Just drop it in for everybody to see, so. Yep.
Okay. So if there's no other questions or comments, thank you. All right, so we're going to move back up, take care of.
Just one more thing.
Oh, yeah.
So in the packet was another item that I threw in there, was a report that I had done with some per pupil spending comparables based on last year's spending per pupil.
Let's do a screen share that.
Sure. I just thought this was important information for us to have when we are communicating with local communities about our spending and trying to justify our budgets and promote them and sell them.
Certainly will give our legislators more accurate information that they can take to clear with them.
I'll start going through it as Chris is putting it up.
What's the header on it?
It's this one right here.
It's the
Spending per pupil.
Oh, okay, sorry, I'm looking through the budget thing.
So this is looking at per pupil spending for the FY25 budget. So the average was $13,343 for the state. 63 out of the 114 districts fell below the state average. There was 51 districts above the state average. and spending per pupil ranged statewide between $8,300 and $18,000. Our districts, I've listed them. So Ira, per pupil spending last year was $10,228. They were the 5th lowest district spender in the state, falling $3,115 below the state average, which is 23% below the state average. Corey Valley is number 11 at $10,686 and 20% below the state average. Well Springs, number 28, $12,104, 9% below the state. And Rutland Town, pretty much right on with the average there. It's $13,417. It was $74 difference between them and the state average. I've also listed some of our neighbors, other Rutland Town school districts, Rutland County school districts, all of, or most of which are above our numbers. So Slate Valley, number 14, Otter Valley, number 31, and they're all ranging from 11,000 to 13,000. And then at the bottom, which does not have any direct correlation with per pupil spending, but these are the announced tuitions for last year. So for those districts that are sending out tuition students, whether it be elementary or secondary, to other districts, this is what everyone is charging for tuition students to come into their schools. Not as much of a disparity between these numbers. Definitely there's a couple maybe outliers here, but I think the majority of them are pretty close. It's just other data for if we're setting our tuitions, which we'll have to do at the December meeting. Again, not anything really directly related to the other comparables, but another just a piece of data for you.
Right, we felt this is important, particularly as we enter budget season. We know that there are a lot of misinformation being put out there. I know people, you'll hear like the state average, and so the state average will be at $22,000, and so I'll get phone calls or emails saying, why are we spending $22,000 on students? I'm like, we're not. And so when Louis and I discussed, we felt it was important that we present our communities with accurate information to show that we are actually being very fiscally responsible within our districts in terms of per pupil spending. So it does kind of counter that information. But this is information that we would be put on the website, to be sent out to stakeholders just to make them aware of exactly what's going on. So it's not that we're just spending money foolishly here. Like I said, we actually have done a very nice job in the SU and from local districts of being very responsible with our monies. It's just that they said that I think that's what's important. Also, having the public understand cost drivers, as well as understanding the ed fund and what really goes into the ed fund and how TIF districts impact the ed fund, and Killington, and water supply has come out of the ed fund. So I think there's some very interesting factors that people have to understand about the ed fund. It's not just schools and school districts dipping into that. There are other parties as well. So.
I think it's also important to note that, we're doing this with small schools. Many of these other Rutland County schools are supervisory districts that are all funneling to one high school. And even with one larger high school, their per pupil spending is, say, bigger than Corey Valley that has 3 smaller high schools.
You're debating the data from the state of this?
Thank you, Louis.
Yes.
Thank you. I like that a lot.
Extremely
Yeah.
valuable.
All right. Thank you very much. I like it. All right, so really quick, we're just going to move down to the community engagement committee update. Somehow applies to this.
Well, I think Robert's rules and warning agendas and having stuff like that's not my strong suit. So we have a meeting, but I think I'm kind of glad. I think kind of the role that I foresee in this. I'm glad that Chris has put together this budget communication plan, and I think our committee's job is going to be to support that, both by sharing ideas across the district, but also what works locally. How can we put a local flair to the admin's plan to get the communication out, because that was really the purpose of why I brought that up, is how do we engage our community to understand what's going on? So I think maybe I put the cart before the horse, but, you know, I would have, personally, I probably would have made the same documents and beat them to it, but I think it's a great document, and I think our job will be now to support that and how to help you guys and all of us best communicate with it and engage the community. So thank you for that. Sorry for the delay, but here we are. So, and I'll have to warn a meeting and have an agenda and all the whatnot for public stuff, but we'll do that between here and there. But I think this document Chris did is fantastic, so thank you.
All right,
That was it.
thanks for the update. All right, so you plan on meeting in October?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Prior to the Monday before it. Do that.
All right.
And not a negotiation.
Just tell me because I'm not the rep for this, obviously, and I don't know what's going to happen. What is it?
It's just a committee to look at how we can better support community engagement, that's all.
Okay,
It's just-
thank you.
yeah.
That's all.
Sharing ideas, so how do we
Yeah,
get more
perfect.
people, you know, instead of
Yeah.
20 people show up
Yeah.
at
I
meetings, or
appreciate that. Thank
just
you.
Facebook, that not everyone's got,
Yeah.
how do we?
It's not really a policy
Right,
creation meeting, it's just
okay.
more of a public relations
Yeah.
style meeting or
Thank you.
committee.
I appreciate that.
All right. We're going to move back up to the consent agenda. Approval of minutes from September 3rd. Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mike. Any amendments or changes to the minutes? Discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Approval of warrants. We have two of them, 1391 and 393.
Make the motion.
Motion by Mike again to approve warrants 391 and 393. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Moving on to superintendent's report.
Thanks, Eric. I just have two items to address. So in your folders, there also was a copy of a draft of the FAQs that we had looked at. And so what I did was took a look at questions that have been asked of us in the past. So look back at meeting minutes, emails that have been sent to myself, to Louis, to other admin. I reached out to some other superintendents as well to kind of gain some better understanding about what's being asked within regionally as well as across the state, and compiled an initial list of just 30 questions that were obviously categorically sorted. This is just a start. I understand that there are a lot of questions that still need to be asked, still need to be addressed. So what we would like to do is create a link on our budget website to which any member of our community can actually submit a question, and there'll be like a drop down or a checkbox. It's for a GRCSU budget, Corey Valley budget, IRA budget, and then there'll be like a 48 to 72 hour turnaround in which we will respond to that question and place that on our FAQ document. So it'll be a running document, and we will also look to sort questions out per district. So there might be some questions that are really just pertain to, say, Rutland Town. Unique situation there, so we will place that in the Rutland Town section. If there's a question that goes across all, then we will place that there. But it just gives us an opportunity. Obviously, we have to make sure that we do anticipate that there'll be some colorful language probably shared. I've seen emails that I receive, and some people just have to understand that there's ways to professionally communicate, then there's other ways of communicating. So we may have to translate some questions and just so it's more appropriate for public forum. But it'll be our goal to respond to as many questions in this FAQ as possible. But it also allows us to get a better understanding in terms of what people are asking and what they're looking for. But just a couple ways. But board members can also submit questions and comments, because I do think as we go through, I know last year, I'll just use Rutland Town as an example, as we were looking through budget revotes, there are a lot of very good questions that were posed that said, well, we should probably address that, and I think we'll find that as we go through. So it'd be a running document, kind of like a repository just for all this information that we can dust off and use from year to year.
Is it possible that we can include a visitor count number so we can actually see what the usage is on that?
Yes.
Because somebody may look at it and not submit a question, but
So I will talk to Greg about, I think when we drive into our website, we can actually collect data in terms of, who's accessing this when, so that's something which we can take a look at the FAQs.
so that I think would help our committee a little bit, because then we could say, well, we've had X number of visitors on this. You have the capacity to go look at it. So we put the responsibility back on the people who need to vote.
Yep. Like I said, and this is just, like I said, another opportunity for us to try to answer questions, try to educate the public on what is a very confusing, the way education is funded in Vermont is just, it's very unique, to say the least, and very convoluted, and I think that the silver lining in last spring's debacle was that people have a better understanding in terms of how the ed fund pool works, and but it can be very confusing. I think as people unpack, what's being thrown out there, and I think there's a lot of misinformation on social media, and I think this will be a way for people to come and ask a question, and that we'll provide an answer as best we can. And so therefore, if if Lisa can answer that, we may ask building admins, Lewis, and we will then direct these to the individual who can better respond. But just like I said, an opportunity for people to be informed.
Can we copyright it so that if somebody else wants to steal, we can get some revenue out of that? Or looking forward.
I think some of these we may have to owe some people some money as well. So gotta be careful. So that's why that was in there. It's just around the FAQ, and that's part of the communication plan. I did also want to highlight, this is not in the, was not in my superintendent's report, but tomorrow, in October 2nd, we have the Southwest Vermont Regional Planning Session with Intern Secretary Saunders. And what that is that you may have heard about this, part of the, the commission that Secretary Saunders is going around and meeting with we have 8 superintendent groups across the state. And so she's doing a regional planning session with each of these groups. It is a closed invite where central office admin and then an SU or SD's board chair was invited. And but the purpose of this really is to explore what's called the regional profile. So we'll see what this regional profile is tomorrow, and then there'll be breakout sessions done by AOE and APA facilitators around mental health, around cost and systems of support, academic proficiency and accountability, college and career readiness, and then there's also a school board members only section, which is more about reviewing state and regional data. So if there's information that I can share, I will share that information in November with the board. Like I said, we're not quite certain what this is, or but like I said, I just wanted to make everyone aware that we will be meeting as a regional group, which is Slate Valley, Rutland Northeast, Rutland City, Mill River, Bennington, and then the GRCSU. And then also I included in your packet, there's a strategic plan updates. I'm not, 7:25 here, I know we still have a lot to do. I think I'm more than happy to answer any questions. I know there's a lot of information on there. I spoke with Lisa about this and an opportunity to collect some feedback from others. But I think what I'd like to do in January is to present more of a breakout in terms of here's the goal, here's the activity, here's where we're at, and then here's where we need to be, just for the board as opposed, like I said, there's a lot in this document, but I think it'd be good for the board to see in January where we're at with respect to each goal, and our goal is all this information that's presented will be completed by June of 2025. And I know there's a lot, but a lot of these are in progress, and some of these work together. So, when we look at MTSS, there's a lot of moving parts to MTSS, and so when you break that out, it seems like a lot, but it really is done. It's part of a whole process. So I'll be more happy to ask any questions about the strategic plan update. Yes, Tina. You're muted, Tina.
Can't hear you.
Yes, she has her phone
Oh,
on.
yeah. Oh,
That's your
Nice knowing you.
did anyone else have any questions?
I take my brother all my time sometimes. No, sure, good.
We won't do.
I'm charging these minutes that are no.
Jeff?
Quick one, yeah, everybody. So this is a great document, but I think that we could go off on mini tangents, maybe larger tangents. So what's the best process, Chris, and to all the members, to provide questions, feedback? I think it's a great document, but it's, you know, it's cumbersome in a good way.
So what do you mean by tangents, Jeff? Could you explain that?
Yeah, so I'm looking at these bullet points, and we could probably spend a half an hour on one of these bullets. We don't want to do that now. So what's the best process for me to provide a question, a comment?
So if you have a question about any of the bullets, feel free to reach out to myself. Lisa, I think, we'll be more than happy to respond to that question. I think these are, remember, the strategic plan it's in motion, so we're not really asking the board to write the strategic plan. It's more in terms of just to give you an update on what it is, what we're doing. And I think in January, our goal would be to have some of these bullets spelled out in terms of, here's where we're at, in terms of here's the deliverable, and then, it's like in January, we are, we've accomplished this part of this, we still have, here's what's still left to do, or, we're checking this one off, or, so we'll have more of a detailed update around those items there. So, but in the meantime, if you have just a question about what that means for just in general, feel free to reach out to us. We'll be more happy to address any of those.
So I appreciate that. I was actually trying to stay within your, you provided some guidance on, you don't want to be bombed with questions, especially this time of year. So I'm trying to go with some structure here.
No, Jeff, I think that's, board members have the right to ask any question at any time. Just as a member of the public can ask a question about any of these documents at any time. So that's not a problem. I think it was around the information request where we're just trying to align that's, and that was in the superintendent report, was if an individual board member would like to request information that they feel is important for budgeting, that it would go, that would be presented at a board meeting and the whole board would sit there and say, okay, that sounds good. That way then the board has a discussion and then the board is receiving the information at the same time so that we're all, they're having a discussion in which they're all, they've had access to the materials. I think that's why, that was the alignment of that. But if you have questions about this, we're more happy to sit down and talk about some of these things with you, Jeff.
Sounds good, thank you.
Yep.
Tina?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I couldn't hear you and you couldn't hear me before. I was just wondering, Chris, where you're going to post this information for the public to review?
So this will be posted on we have a strategic plan that we're cleaning up as well. I spoke with Shannon and Greg about this. And any member of the public can request this document at any time as well. So we will have this publicly available. But we will have the strategic plan page will be cleaned up, and that'll be available there. So.
All right. If there's no other questions, we'll move on to Assistant Superintendent's report.
Good evening, everyone. It is nice to see you. You have my written report, just a lot of launching things for the school year going on and getting all our programs up and running and curriculum up and running, professional development up and running, debriefing August, prepping for October, all of the normal activities. We've also been, there's a group of us who are attending a state level training on the revised education quality standards, which will take effect on July 1st of 2025. And there's a lot of new information and new quality standards to unpack, become familiar with, and share back with our team. So you will continue to get updates from us about those as the year unfolds as well. And as we go through the process of looking at what the implications are for our work and what's ahead of us. And our ESSER grant, as you know, is wrapping up yesterday, and so a lot of final and wrap-up activities related to that too. We have a curriculum presentation for you this evening as part of the end of that ESSER work. As most of you, I think, were part of the conversation, but for anyone who was not at the time, about a year and a half ago, we had requested Jen's competent help in supporting curriculum work at the SU level in addition to her regular duties, and we had funded that work in addition to her long days already with ESSER funding. And so as the funding in the grant is ending, we wanted to come before you and present a report on all the amazing things that Jen helped accomplish, and championing for us in the last 18 months-ish. And we also have some conversation for executive session around some potential next steps, which could involve personnel or contract topics. So we'll split our presentation into two kind of sections for you this evening. But I'm going to let her steal the show and take the thunder because she well deserves it, and just we would be remiss without saying thank you to her for all of her concentrated effort. And
Let's dial it down. We're never going to be able to get her done through the door.
I feel like I always get to go after Lewis, which is not fair. And
I was gonna say, we could have put you before Lewis. It looked like you were kind of falling asleep.
okay, Lewis, let's go. Thank you, presentation. I think like requesting me to do it is really nice. Like I basically forced myself into that, like to asking permission for this. So there were some things that were related to the strategic plan that I noticed really needed to be accomplished, maybe more exponentially than we would have been able to do without a curriculum coordinator position that had previously been approved. In particular, sort of the first 5 bullets there of this plan are where I was focusing a lot of the work for this year. So how do we move forward with a curriculum? How do we integrate the science of reading? How do we look at reading and writing across content areas? Making some more research-based practices in math, comprehensive balanced assessment system, and creating those things locally too. This is important. And then how does that all play into professional development? And so my goals from that, Chris, do you want to just change? Back when I presented this was by the end of the year we would have a framework for future work and PD implications. We would have the curriculum documents that had gone through our revision practice where we had these things that were articulated the years before, but teachers were just using them and then they needed to sort of go through and edit and actually see if they worked in practice. And then VITCAP was rolled out at the state level. We had moved away from SBAC as our assessment system, and so we needed someone to kind of dig into those things and see what was available as far as practice work and what was going to be asked of our children on the test, since those results are sent out to other people. And then begin the development of sort of proficiency scales and performance tests. So that was what I promised you. And I've got most of it done. So as far as the curriculum,
Could you maybe just explain proficiency scales, just break that down? Just people who don't know.
Sure. So those things are like, if I am doing well on this learning target, I can divide multi-digit fractions or something like that. What does success look like doing that? How will I know as a student, how will I know as a teacher that someone is proficient in that? So those are sort of what those scales are made of. And we are working on that moving forward, and we're building common assessments so that all teachers know and understand what success looks like. All students in our district know and understand, and we're all kind of using assessments that teachers create in order to gauge that sort of thing.
Thank you.
Yep. So this is linked in the drive for you. It is a draft website, and I am not a website designer, and so it's not as pretty as a finished product will be, but it has a lot of information. more than our academics tab currently has right now. It has our definition of curriculum, it has what we have available for programming, K through 12 in ELA and math. It talks about resources that parents can access in those things if you wanted to help out at home. It talks about our assessments that we use. And so it's really like all that information on one central site. It also has, when we talk about curriculum as a district and we look at different subject areas, the years that we're going to do that in. And so last year we promised to look at ELA, and we definitely did that. This year we're looking at math, and we have a plan for that, and how science and social studies and all the other elective areas fit into that. And then how that is an ongoing process. Sort of curriculum doesn't ever get done. That's not something that happens. You're constantly looking at it, updating it according to best practice and the research available and what the newest things are. So that is out there, and it is part of the work that will be finalized at the end of this year's publishing that for all public consumption. Yes, Tina?
Quick question, Jen. I took a look at that on the website, and I wasn't sure where 9 through 12 math was. Was that in the same block as K through 8 math?
So currently, and I'll get to this in a minute, but currently they have sequenced 9 through 12 math already. We actually got ahead, and so I have to go back in and update it. So I had pulled it out of there because I'm not sure where we'll actually end up with that. We have some work that we're doing at the 6 through 8 level about moving algebra to be accessible to 8th graders. That's sort of just a readiness factor. And then all of our classes, algebra, algebra 2, pre-calculus, we have those standards sequenced out, and they're in the process of actually building common assessments this year. So I'm hopeful, fingers crossed, that like we can set them up for success on that, and that we would have those available too. There isn't,
great, thank you.
Yeah, and there isn't actual like standardized programming. Like we have bridges that we use K through 6, or we're pushing out to use district-wide this year. There isn't really a math program. You can kind of find textbooks, but it's not the same as elementary. So it's a little bit different when we talk about elementary and secondary with curriculum. We did a lot of PD with the admin team about like, what does curriculum look like? How can I go into teachers' classrooms and use curriculum documents and be able to make sure my teachers are doing what we said we're doing? So we did some work with that. We also talked about if new curriculum comes out and a teacher wants to do it, we don't just have teachers adopting curriculum into their own classrooms. And so there is a policy, and we've sort of created a procedure for that, and we're in the process of vetting that out and getting everyone on board, so that if you do have a great thing, you can bring it before people. We look at it, we decide, is that a way we want one school to pilot? Is that a way we want all schools to do? We want to move forward with that work. So that procedure was developed as well.
And Jen, I think that was not limited to just large-scale programs.
Absolutely not.
Books, certain. So I think we have to, get a better control of what really is being taught in our classroom or schools, so we have a better understanding of where does that everything is aligned with our standards as well as our strategic plans.
Yep. I developed a PD plan for math and literacy along with Lisa and the admin team, like taking into account where we were for at least the next year or two, moving some of this work forward. And then we are in the process of developing sort of literacy non-negotiables that we would use in conjunction with the UFly training that is rolling out sort of K through 2 as our program for those grade levels. And so that would be, if I walk into a literacy block in your classroom, the chunk of time you've set aside to teach literacy, these are the things that I would have to see in all of our classrooms. So we kind of had that standardized practice.
And Jen, UFly is?
UFly is
Florida Literacy
Initiative. Yes, thank you for acronym checking me. Yeah.
I know it is.
Yeah.
Not
Thank
quite
you.
sure what UFly might be.
Yep.
Sorry.
Nope, that's all right. I appreciate it. So where are we at with our curriculum documents? All pre-K through 12 teachers have reviewed their prioritized standards that they developed, and they've made recommendations, and then those recommendations were actually reviewed by Lisa and I and a group of other teachers around the district to say, like, is this something that we do want to move forward on? Is it, we're not ready to move forward on it? We need more time, we need more conversations about that. We have sequenced all of the K through 12 standards, which was a feat in itself, and we are establishing sort of quarterly benchmarks. So if I walk into any first grade classroom in this district, I should see similar standards being taught in a similar time frame. And that when we get to a certain amount of time, we're developing common assessments that actually gauge whether students know and are able to do the things that we're saying they are. And that actually is what best practice says moves teaching and learning, right? Teachers having conversations about what they did and looking at their classroom data about things that they created, not things that are created for them. So
I'm just going to interject one anecdote here. Excuse me, at August in-service, I had the pleasure of stopping by the room where the second grade teachers had been meeting, and they were now with an aligned writing sequence over the course of the year where they're teaching the same writing units at the same time, had developed and identified common assessments that they were going to use to assess student writing, and had developed a plan for how they were going to bring writing samples back to each other to calibrate their scoring of those and to talk about the instructional practices that led to successes or challenges for students in each of their buildings. And they were so excited, like so enthusiastic and excited to have the opportunity, to be required to have the opportunity to do the same thing at the same time and to share that work with each other across our schools. So that's just one example of what that means when we say that we have aligned our sequence and ELA. You know, that's one of the kinds of things that can happen when we get to that point in our curriculum work.
And when you said district, but you mean supervisory, right?
Yes.
Throughout the whole supervisory.
Yes,
So
sorry.
that
Thank you.
We're moving toward that aligned curriculum
Yep.
throughout all schools.
Yep,
Yes.
all schools. We have our 7 through 12 math prioritized standards sequenced. That's across the SU. And then our 7 through 12 science and social studies have begun this work. They're dipping their toes into it, and we're going to move them forward along. But that actually wasn't planned in the framework for the next few years, so it's nice that we're kind of moving ahead a little bit with them.
Jen, I'm sorry.
Oh, please, no.
You already do, but, you can, I mean, somebody may be watching this, you know, and understand, what does sequence mean?
Sure.
So when you say there's sequence, what does that mean?
Sample on the next slide.
Yes.
There you go.
There you
Good
go.
segue, there you go.
Yeah. So this is an example of, thank you for that. This is an example of the kindergarten reading sequence. And so they actually, our teachers developed units of study just as examples. They are not requirements. Like if you wanted to teach these particular Common Core standards in this order, this is a unit you could do it. So what is non-negotiable is that we have the prioritized standards at the bottom are in the first 6 weeks, those ones. And the second weeks after that are in the ones, in the next 2 weeks after that are in the ones below. So that's the sequence that I'm talking about. We adopted Common Core standards in Vermont. Previous work was like saying that these are the ones that are the most high leverage activities for our students. And so those high leverage, when are they occurring? What kind of builds upon each other in a learning fashion? And then their sort of unit outcomes, what will I be able to see at the end of this for students? What kind of essential questions? And then the common assessments are linked below there too. So that's what I mean when I talk about that. So that's taking all the things at one grade level and saying this is the order in which I'm going to teach them and assess them. VCAP and Cognia, so all of the Cognia formative assessments, so those are the assessments that kind of build to the larger state assessment that we have in April and May. Cognia put out probably in December-ish, like a bank of these assessments that teachers could use and kids could take practice tests on, but they're not named really well. They're kind of like all over the place, that's to say it nicely. And they kind of said, like, here it is. And so I went through and I matched them to our prioritized standards so that teachers could very easily say, like, I'm teaching this standard. This is the place in Cognia that I can go and find it. It was really fun work. But we, like, there it is sampled below. And I developed some training materials so that if teachers wanted to go in and practice these things, they were able to do that. We rolled that out in the March in-service for teachers with hope that we can actually roll it out sooner this year so that they can do it over time as they're actually teaching them. They're not as friendly as we had originally hoped, and so that's why we kind of did a little bit of a pivot. We have these resources available, but if we can start building our common assessments, teacher-led assessments that do the same thing, that's like a better choice for us in the long run. Teachers would like to rely on their own created assessments versus state-created assessments. Yeah.
What is
No,
Connie?
no, I want to thank you for doing that, because I know that as we're meeting with admin this year, we do understand that there's a need for us to, obviously show growth through fast grades, but we also understand that we have to show increased proficiencies in our schools. That we have to do better. We understand that, and the formative interim assessments are a critical piece to that, and so we are asking teachers to use those to really get a better understanding in terms of where the students are at and how they can adjust their curriculum or their lessons. And I think by taking this mess of a pile of assessments and really kind of, categorizing them,
Yeah.
makes it that much easier for teachers then to begin using them this
Yeah.
year, because that is a key point. So
Right.
I just want to say thank you, and how it aligns up with the work we are doing through strategic plans.
And sometimes, like, in the system, it's a little messy, so there are these paper documents that you can kind of print out. Louis, Tina, don't yell at me for being the printer person, but you can actually just kind of like white out the answers and then give the kid that versus having to go into like a whole separate system. So there's an easier way to use it too, so.
Also, just to interject there, that, previously we had the SBAC interim assessments aligned to our curriculum docs, and they were structured a little bit differently, and so it was easier to align a specific standard with a specific performance assessment. So having that work, we removed those when we shifted away from SBAC, and having that back in as a resource for teachers is just a really great tool. Saving teachers time, always a goal for us.
And Chris, if you want to go to the next slide, it's just what that looks like. It has the actual, our standard, what that standard means, and then the name of the assessment, where they can find it. So let's just.
On that previous slide, it said PD, that's professional development. That's
Correct.
teacher's professional development.
Yes.
So it's not the police station.
No, thank you for that. Yep. Okay. And then performance tests with units and common assessments. In that previous picture, kind of showed you what those look like. And those sort of what that group that I asked you guys to fund to create these things for me. So I had a group of like 7 to 8 teachers that were creating these units, creating the scales on how they would be graded. And then the continuation of this work is this year. So we picked it back up in August. We are planning to hit it again in October and in March. And so this work is just going to keep moving forward, and that's sort of that PD plan that we talked about of like, we're not going to let it drop. It's going to keep moving forward. And so I just wanted to bring it all back. Like, our goal is to have all of these things by 2028. That's sort of that 5-year outlook from when we started all this work. And so, I think there is going to be like part of that work. Tina, I think you asked me like, will you come back with some suggestions of like budget implications and all that stuff? And so I did. And Chris felt like the best place to talk about some of those things, because it does have to do with contract. It does have to do with like, how do you continue this work in a steady fashion as part of like an executive session. So. And then I just really appreciate this opportunity that you guys gave me. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer those.
Thank you.
Thank you for all your work. Any questions? All right. Well, I guess if you have any questions, we can.
Email me, please do.
I told her that now we're going to continue our relationship in a volunteer capacity in a different way.
There's a lot of information there, and even just looking at the curriculum stuff online, there's plenty to look through.
Yes.
But, all right.
And your enthusiasm and you just are wonderful in that respect, because you just motivate to get everybody off the ground.
Well, I hope that's how they feel. Although some people probably
Good
feel
for
I'm
you.
trudging them along.
I applaud you. Nice job.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to move on to personnel. We have contract recommendations. We only have one professional staff. The rest is information only. So we're looking for a motion to approve Rachel Greenia. Motion by Mike.
discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. I did have a question for the extracurricular. It just says stipend to be determined.
Are the stipends
Mentoring
changing?
stipends.
Oh, were those mentoring stipends?
Yes.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
So those, usually what that means is that it is a special educator. And for the special educators, we have a range of hours that they can complete. And that really is based on how much support the new special educator needs. And so the mentor has within a range of hours, start at the bottom and a top of like no less than this number of hours, no more than this number of hours, but that they can customize their work a little bit to better meet the needs of the new special educator. As you know, many of our special educators have come into the profession on provisional licenses or non-traditional licensure pathways. And so they have a variety of needs and experiences in the role.
So the first one on the list is not a special educator.
I'm guessing, that must be a nurse.
But in the past, haven't there been tiers for special education?
There's still like a level 1 and a level 2.
Yeah.
Yep.
The first one is around nursing homes.
Yep. And we have an expectations document and a contract that goes out to all of them that specifies what their minimum and maximum
Okay. All right.
So would, the question would help in the future if we just put what the max amount is for these stipends, or that range, just so you can see? Or?
Well, I think in the past, there used to be a sheet that just came and it would say like tier 1, let's say 180, tier 2, 320, and then you said like from, 0 to 20 hours or like that. I think that's in the beginning when we started, you provided something like that.
remember. It's been this way a couple of years.
You can look at, provide that information.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I can't say if I'll remember this in a year and then ask the question. So
Well,
I
one
think
nice
if
thing
you,
about Sean,
yeah.
Sean takes, very detailed notes, so we always have that to look back on.
No, but that's what, in the beginning, you provided a handout that said that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it showed, like, what does tier 1 do, what does a
Yes.
tier 2 do?
Yeah, we have a requirements document for gen ed and special ed.
Mhm.
Okay.
I can have this put in the board packet for next month, just as informational, if that's helpful to people.
Sure.
All right, we're gonna move on to new business quick. So we have our GRCSU annual work plan adoption. So I don't know if you want to talk about this a little bit. So Tina and I got together.
Just
Okay.
given time, I was curious if we should table this and just do it next time.
We can do that. I mean,
Yeah, since we.
I know it doesn't take a lot of time, but the other things do, so we can just skip it.
everyone okay with that?
Yes.
All right, table. All right, VHI proxy. Same thing as the viz bid. We'll need to appoint a delegate.
You going? Eric.
All right. All right. Any other nominations, I guess?
Oh, I thought that's what Mike just said.
I'm just joking. All right, so. All right, so.
Aye.
Vote for everybody.
What's that?
I cast one vote. Everybody.
Okay.
You're it, bud.
All right.
Thank you.
Yep, all right, so there's no objection to that. I have no problem doing the VHI proxy as well. Okay, resolutions. So I trust everyone read the resolutions for the October 17th meeting. Basically, what I would ask if the board wants to take any specific stance on these resolutions, or just allow, like we did last year, some flexibility at the annual meeting. based off of the discussion on these resolutions.
I'm for flexibility based on the discussion at the meeting, and then you just report back.
Okay. All right, any objection to that?
Not at all.
Okay. I'll take that as a unanimous consent. Perfect. And we'll move on to policy. So we have two policies for adoption, H5 and F3. So we'll look for a motion to adopt H5 and F3.
So moved.
Linda. Any discussion on these two? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. All right, H4. So H4 was sent back to the SU board from Rutland Town. Keanu, if you want to talk about that a little bit.
Sure. I know that we already had a little bit of a discussion at the last SU meeting regarding some items that I thought were confusing. After the meeting, I did a little research and I found another policy that was very similar to our policy, except I felt like it took out a little bit of the confusion by taking out the school-sponsored clubs, such as the PTO. I'm not sure if booster clubs are school-sponsored or not, so that is another question mark. But it takes out school-sponsored clubs, so they're not necessarily held to the same policy. Plus, it added in electronic communications, such as school social media accounts and email systems and things like that. So I thought it was a little bit more all-encompassing, and that was put into the bucket. It's, like I said, very similar to what was approved by our policy committee, but it just had some less confusion and a little bit more to it. The Rutland Town Board felt also that the word imprimatur, again, does have some ties to the Catholic Church, is a word that is not in the common language of most people. And so we had thought that replacing imprimatur with implied endorsement would be a little bit more easy for people to understand when they're reading the policy. So those were the three main reasons that we did not approve it unanimously. So we were hoping that the SU board would consider using the other policy from the Central Vermont Supervisory Union, I believe, in place, adjusting the GRCSU in the correct places and whatnot, but just adopting that one instead, with that one little correction with imprimatur or editing.
So looking for a motion to move this to second reading?
No,
it was-
it's not a second reading.
No.
And also, I think we still have the same issue that Eric brought up before. Not all booster clubs are school-sponsored, some are not. So I think that is a problem for us within Corey Valley. I don't know how much I love the other piece with the social, electronic, like that. Because, let's say, so does that mean like our schools have a Facebook page and we ask a school to post something that's happening in our community on that page that is a function of the community? Where does that fall within this? Because I'm a little confused with the.
I think that it would still just have to go along with this policy.
Yeah.
So most of
is
it
this
would
policy
be allowed, just
required?
like it, if you would take that, that little poster and attach it to an email as an attachment for the community. Or you would post it around the school. It would be under the same scrutiny whether it's posted in the school or on the school website. And I do agree with you, Lisa. I do wish that there was something that said, like a little exception for, school or superintendent would, may approve something that doesn't follow this with, at their discretion, such as, a booster club asking for donations. Because technically, if you follow this policy verbatim, it does say that fundraising is strictly prohibited. So I don't know if maybe it would make sense to send this back to the policy committee to look at a way to make it legitimate for clubs like the Booster Club, and have that little exception, or have that exception for any non-school sponsored group that the superintendent would have the right to approve regardless if it follows this directly or something like that.
Are these required policies?
No.
Okay.
So,
And we haven't had this policy?
no, no,
And we have been functioning?
correct.
So was there an issue that made us think we needed to adopt the policy, or is it simply when we did the audit from?
It's based off the policy.
Audit.
Yeah, the policy audit. And it was recommended.
Mhm.
The way, like, in this is the way I read this, is the policy that is from Central Vermont is from last year. They adopted it in December of '23. But this policy that we have that went through committee was reviewed by the VSBA in June of '24. That's why we waited to take this on.
Mhm.
So their policy is outdated. And the way I read this is that it really, if you take out the administrative responsibilities in the VSBA model policy, that's where it allows for those booster clubs. The way I read it is the superintendent can authorize it. So I think if you're worried about, this completely doesn't have anything about those clubs in there. It just lists.
Well, it says, my concern is where it says whose primary purpose is fundraising. So that could be attached to multiple things. So let's say that something's happening in a community, we want you to advertise for that. The primary focus of that is, it's a fundraising event. I mean, let's be honest, that's what 90% of events are.
Right.
They're fundraising. So our communities are small. And I'm just right now just looking at Corey Valley, and we have lots of events that are within our communities that we share in our newsletters, that our principals share out. We share across community or whatever like that. Based on this policy, my feeling is most of those things are no longer going to be able to be shared in newsletters that we currently receive. So, we haven't had the policy. I think debating the policy has created more issues than not having the policy has had. And my recommendation would be if the policy committee wants to take it back and refashion something, but I'm not in favor of adopting or okaying the Central Vermont policy and just saying, put GRCSU in here.
Yeah.
So that's my nickel.
Anyone else?
I agree.
I would agree with Lisa. I'd be happy with it back.
Okay.
I'll send it back to policy.
Good deal.
Yeah.
Yes.
I agree. Yep.
Great, thanks. No, so what?
How about sending it back to
Who's the chair
policy
then?
to have a discussion whether we need the policy?
So, okay, let me ask this, what would the board like in terms of, because, I mean, this is model policy,
what exactly do we want to get out of this?
Well, maybe
as far
that's
as-
what Linda said, you know, maybe asking or having Chris ask admin, have we had any issues, have we had any concerns or complaints? Is the policy needed? And maybe asking the VSBA, since it's not a required and only recommended, how many SUs have actually adopted the policy? I'd be curious
In
in that.
I don't know, maybe Tina, you and I can get together and talk about some of the other concerns too. And then, that way I have at least more information, we can find some sort of.
Sure.
And answer some of the questions, because, you know, like I said, I think the model policy covers PTOs, booster clubs, for fundraising and all of that. The way I read this, there's exceptions in there. And, you know, your PTOs and those booster clubs that's what they're supposed to do, is to fundraise for schools or clubs or activities. So, and that's why I thought this policy covered everything. So if there's any additional information to bring back to the policy committee is basically what I'm asking for.
Well, I think the problem is about the fundraising. My concern is that how is it going to inhibit or limit advertising from within our communities about other activities that are going on whose primary are that? And will that then be hampered?
Okay.
So, and
I just don't want to come back with a model policy.
yeah, I mean, my vote is, we haven't had one, we seem to have been operating fine, and if there haven't been any issues, you know.
I think we need to keep in mind, though, sometimes policies are put in place to prevent future problems.
Sure.
Not saying that there isn't, but just keep in mind that sometimes policies are there in anticipation that
Sure,
there could
I
be an
get
issue
it.
in the future that we need to deal with, and we don't have a guideline, and now, then what do we do? So,
Yeah, I'm all for being proactive, I just don't want it to diminish what we're currently doing, so.
Okay. So is that the consensus of the board, just have it come back to policy committee and try and work through some of these issues?
Yes.
All right, sounds
Yes.
good. All right. Okay, so we're gonna move on, there's no general public. No.
Well, Amanda is here.
Oh, yeah. Amanda is.
I don't know if she had something, she was here for budget.
Yeah. So is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak?
Okay.
You probably don't know. Okay.
I was just listening in, but thank you.
Okay.
tell you about you.
All right.
Next meeting.
All right, next meeting, November 5th, legislative invite, just for information, and there's no other discussion on that. We have an executive session for personnel negotiations and
Tina, is November 5th voting day?
Yes.
Do you think that
No.
they're really gonna wanna come on
No.
voting day?
Some of us can't,
Oh.
we'll be busy that night.
we've got Tina and
I'm
then,
just here.
I was just curious if, for our future agenda items, that we could also have an update on, just out of curiosity for the SU members to know how the Wells Springs Community Forums went.
sure.
And then we'll have to add the annual work plan back on there too as a future agenda item.
Correct.
So we need to change the November, because that is election night, yes.
Election day.
Election day,
Yeah, but I don't think your
till 7 o'clock.
people are gonna wanna come and speak to you, particularly if perhaps they weren't.
Meredith, you were starting to say something,
And the
I
fourth
didn't
is-
quite catch it.
The 4th is also too.
I can't be there, election day. I'll be counting.
Yeah, that's what I meant by night.
Oh,
Because the polls close at 7.
And the 4th would be town meeting.
We don't have town meetings before you vote.
That's right. Not that.
Not in November.
So we had to do
No.
March.
okay.
So I just take your legislative thing off. So, Well, plenty of stuff to talk
Lisa,
about.
it's actually a request for what we want to do about the legislative, like asking them in December, what we want to ask them, how we want to run it, that kind of thing. It's not to invite them.
Oh,
Oh, okay.
well, that's how it read. Because it says invite.
Gotcha.
So what's the date?
Okay. So I make a motion we move into executive session at 8:10 for personnel negotiations, labor relations with employees, or 8:15, we take a break.
Well, I think we're,
Still trying to
Still
figure
trying
out
to
a
figure out the
date.
date for the meeting.
For what meeting?
I think,
November.
I think there's consideration on changing the meeting date.
There is?
Well, it's election day. Our meeting, this meeting would be scheduled on election day.
Yeah, you can vote during the day. You don't have to wait till 6 o'clock.
Some of us
No,
have to work the
but
polls
Meredith said
afterwards.
she's counting.
Oh. Okay.
The 4th and the 6th are open. We'd like to move.
The 6th is not open, Chris, because Rutland Town moved their board meeting to
The 6th is not.
Center Rutland,
Yep, thank you.
Can we have the 4th?
but the 12th is
We
open.
can move it on the 12th.
Well, seriously? My vote is to keep it on the 5th.
I vote to move it, especially Tina, don't you have an executive meeting prior to the general meeting?
Yes, but I believe the executive committee can all make it that day.
Okay.
So it would be actually easier to keep it because that was already set, but
Yeah.
we didn't look at 12th as an option.
Yeah, I guess we probably should have thought about that when we approved the board meeting schedule back in March.
Yeah, it's a
So-
lot to move it now, because there's so much stuff.
I
going
guess,
on.
I guess the big question is, are we gonna have a quorum? Like, or just, I guess, just to get an
Is there a
idea.
problem with the 4th?
What is the problem, Mike? You have to count? Are you a JP?
Have other duties.
I'm a JP and assistant town clerk, so I have to be there all night.
I'm a JP as well, but, I mean, we have 10 other ones.
We don't.
Well, I'm looking for like some sort of consensus on whether we keep the meeting or we schedule it.
Like you said, we're worried about a quorum, who can make it?
Yeah,
I'm good.
that's good. For the 5th.
I can make it
And it's up in the air. I can come on the, I can come. I don't know about Eric, but I can come.
Mike, you can.
I will have to pawn my responsibility off on somebody else for that night, for the town.
Well,
It's on the polls closed tonight.
7. I mean, the 4th, can more people make the 4th? It is important that people are here because we are going to be discussing the budget.
yeah,
Probably just.
And we're going to be
Just saying.
receiving the wellness center update, so
yeah.
it would be nice to have,
I can't make the 4th.
For it.
so.
I can do it. If I was the one that's coming, I
It's
can
just-
do
I
it.
can
so
make whatever. I mean, I think,
To move
my
it.
personal opinion, and it should be a national holiday to begin with, so I don't think we should hold our meeting on
Well-
National Election Day.
Everyone got their ballot mailed to them.
Yeah, like, well, I mean, with the folks respectfully that are working the polls and stuff like that. So, you said the 6th?
6th does not work with Rutland Town as meeting that night, so. Which opens up the 12th, if we would like to keep this on a Tuesday, the following Tuesdays.
Yeah, the 12th doesn't work because the 11th is a holiday, so municipal meetings are moved.
Is the 4th an option?
We have George isn't available for it, and I thought someone else said that. They weren't available. I can't keep it. Huh? You're not available?
Jen, is Tim available?
I looked, I think he's fine.
Need to fix that
Let's
honeydew
do it the
list.
4th.
Who can't make the 4th?
George.
George?
Was the 7th an option or no?
The 7th is an option. I am in Burlington for the outstanding teacher ceremony, so I could attend, it goes till 7, so.
Okay, well, I don't know, how do you feel about that, George?
About what?
You can't make the 4th?
I would rather be here
Okay.
if it's only one versus 3 or 4.
Well, how many can't make the 5th? 2?
It's 50% more than one.
I'm just asking the question. I wasn't sure how many people.
I think, yeah, 2.
Another issue with having it on the 5th is that the exec meeting can't be right before it, but we can still have that on the 5th for exec committee.
Yeah.
Actually, it would be very difficult for me to make it on the 4th for sure. Sorry.
So now we're at 50/50.
Oh.
So what about the 7th?
So-
This is in Burlington.
Right, but he can join virtually and we can make Jen come and run the, what?
Can't Rutland Town just move their
I don't
stuff?
think we can join virtually.
Oh, you can't?
No, because the ceremony
It's a
will
dinner,
be
yeah.
Yes.
going on during
Oh.
the same time.
So at this point, maybe I'd say we just keep it for the 5th, and I don't know. We have that option to have alternates for the, as
Yeah, but you're bringing 2 alternates in right as you're determining the budget. I think that's a little cruddy.
Again, well, we've
Is
been talking
Wednesday off
about,
the table? I mean, Tina, we can move ours. We gotta do this budget before we do our budget. so-
Is it your regular Rutland Town budget? Or
I
maybe-
don't think that that's a good idea, Colin, because we've already advertised it with the public.
But this one's already been
About
advertised as well.
3,700 people
Yeah,
have shown
everybody-
up.
everybody's-
So they can move dates.
How has it been advertised differently than regular meetings?
We put it into our
Oh,
Rutland Town newsletter that's going out any day now.
Forgot about that.
Have you been getting good turnouts? Have you been getting good public turnouts?
Nobody. We don't. But like, this is our, like the quarterly letter that goes, we actually put it in that
So you
one.
can't-
And we moved it.
You can't change.
We moved it to do it at town hall
All right,
to
folks.
accommodate, yeah.
yeah, we gotta move on here.
Yeah, because we're gonna be at
Yeah.
9 o'clock
Like,
here.
we still have an executive session, and,
What about the 13th? Is the 13th the meeting? Or that's the week of meetings, right?
yeah. it's the-
Yeah.
Can we go the following week? No,
Oh,
we can't.
After our.
That's holiday week, so no, it's.
Yeah,
Like,
that's,
that's terrible, like, it's not, just keep it as is. I mean, it's been on the calendar all year. That's my thought. Anyone else?
I unfortunately agree with you, Eric. I'm sorry, Meredith and Mike, but it has been on the calendar, which is why we have to accept it in April. So it's really important to look at the entire year when we're looking at that calendar to make sure that we don't have issues like this going forward.
Yeah, and, I mean, I'd be okay with changing it, but there's just too many conflicts. This is getting really complicated, so, but I'm ready to move on, and Lisa's made a motion to move into executive session.
we'll say 819 now. For personnel negotiations, labor relation agreements with employees. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. We are in executive session in 10 minutes.